Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast. And unfortunately, you have failed your 50-50 because we are off banner this week. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week, we asked the question, Qui a la coupe la fromage? Um, so, Dave, what about Expedition 33? I know that we've both been been playing it, and just wanted to hear your quick general. Oh, I guess I should also. You can tell we're very professional here. Just lead in. Spoilers from this point forward. If you haven't beat the game at this point, now's your time to get out. Spoilers from this point forward. Um, Dave, what are your general thoughts about Expedition 33?
I'm still a little speechless at you bring this in French there.
Well,
It was a wee moment as opposed to a woo moment. And I know some people probably, if you've played the game, understand that reference. But yeah. So this week discussing Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and so I kind of want to discuss how this game came up on the radar, because in all honesty, for me, it had flown under the radar. I hadn't seen really anything about it until the day that it launched. Or I guess maybe I'd seen something, promo for it like months and months and months and months ago, like in passing, and then just kind of had forgotten about it because there's a plethora of things that we've seen, right? As far as drip trailer marketing for things way down the road. So the day it came out, is actually kind of the day it came up on my radar, and I was watching a couple streamers play it just to see what this was about, because my first take from watching a streamer play it was, wow, this game looks beautiful. And I was captured, by the voice acting, and the music was intriguing. And so then from watching somebody play the very introductory part of it to then going and reading a review and then being a little bit confused, because the review made it sound like it was a turn-based game, but then they referenced listening for audio cues, which implied an action element to it, and then watching a video of actual combat in that review, instead of just reading the review, answered all my questions. And then from there, I was like, hey, where is this game on? Is this on like the Xbox Game Pass? Is it on Steam? Where is it? And sure enough, it's on both of those platforms. So said I'll download it and give it a go. And boy, am I glad that I did. Steve, what about you? Where was Clair Obscur on your radar of games, or did it come out of nowhere, kind of like it did for me?
It very much so was a come out of nowhere for me as well. If I'm being 100% honest, I really wasn't aware of it until the post-launch hype. It was mainly once it came up in a number of podcasts that I listened to that I kind of went, okay, you know what, I'll give it a shot. The Frenchiness was something that I was willing to give it a shot, for like just the level of French that is in the game kind of intrigued me. That, and it's been a while since there's been a new high profile JRPG turn-based combat style game, and wanted to give it a shot, especially since a lot of people are, speaking very highly of it, and it's a genre of game that I enjoy, so I wanted to send a message to the market by supporting that style game that came out. Wanted to make sure that it was a potential success, and that perhaps other franchises that shall go unnamed at this point in time maybe finally go back to their roots, but I kind of doubt that it ever will at this stage of the game. Huh.
Finally go back to their roots, you say?
Finally, maybe. One can fantasize, but it's been 25 years, so I think that ship has kind of thoroughly sailed at this point. So if you want to feel old, Final Fantasy X came out in 2020, 2021. So it's been about 25 years since they last made a turn-based RPG. You're welcome.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as far as the genre, like I know Steve, kind of, you mentioned it there, is RPGs and turn-based RPGs are one of my favorite genres. I like old school growing up RPGs on the old consoles and everything. That was our gaming, right? And that's kind of stuff that we grew up with. And so to see this game come out of nowhere and kind of take over and take a hold, monopoly of the discussion when it comes to games that are coming out and such was really refreshing to see, because I think for me there were a couple things that I wanted to touch on, and then we can kind of get into maybe the game itself and the mechanics and everything that they do well, and I think we both have some critiques as well. But as far as what the game means to the genre as a whole, this game encapsulates so much that we love with RPGs. Rather than having an open world, they have an overworld, right? The turn-based action with some of the new age elements of the real time, kind of the quick time events and dodging and stuff, is what we kind of, or what I kind of hoped the Final Fantasy VII remake was going to be, in terms of staying truer to the gameplay mechanics of the original. And so to be able to play this, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Now I have plenty of other critiques of Final Fantasy VII remake and squabbles with it, and I know Steve, you do, and that's not what we're here to talk about.
Subject best left untouched at this point.
Yeah, so that alone is just talk about Clair Obscur. Yeah, it was something that I really enjoyed. I will fully admit I am absolutely terrible at the dodging, parrying, and then the attacking stuff. And also, for context, I am playing this on PC with mouse and keyboard, so I don't know if you played with a controller, if that maybe you felt was better for you. But I, as a whole, am not the best at a dodge parry system. It's, I think, part of the reason I don't love Dark Souls games. I can appreciate that they're very good games, very well done, like Elden Ring is. But I am awful at it, and banging my head against the wall trying to beat one boss for 3 hours is not what I consider fun, but I can still appreciate that they're good. And this gave me kind of that mix of both worlds. So despite not being the best at dodging and attacking, I was still able to be successful and enjoy the game and feel a sense of accomplishment without laying too much into that frustration that maybe comes with the full-on action-based RPGs.
There's a couple of things I kind of want to respond to there.
Yes, please do.
You did mention sort of how Clair Obscur affects the landscape of turn-based RPGs going forward, and I guess at this point I'm going to put on my critical cynic hat, I guess, and be a little bit of the downer, a little bit of the contrarian against a lot of a wave of sentiment that I have seen in the gaming space and community, which is, to a certain degree, I think the game has reached the point where its success has kind of become overstated. I don't want to diminish the game in any way, shape, or form. I think it's a very good game. To be clear, I think it's a easy contender for Game of the Year. But I have heard some statements of like Game of the Decade or similar, and I would push back very strongly at even Game of the last 3 years. I feel like there's been a lot of very solid games that have come out, between in the last 3 years, and I'm not so pessimistic that I think the next 9 years are going to be, so bad in gaming that, Clair Obscur is going to be a height that we're just not going to be able to reach again. So I think there's been a little bit of hyperbole around the game. I also feel like, as I previously mentioned, it's been 25 years since Final Fantasy released a turn-based RPG. And I think in general, there's been a sentiment of like, oh, turn-based RPGs aren't a thing anymore, which has led to this sort of overhyping of Expedition 33, where, people forget that Persona's a thing. A lot of the systems in Clair Obscur are aped pretty heavily from things like Persona, from Lost Odyssey. Final Fantasy VIII is a direct inspiration that they've mentioned. A lot of the mechanics that I'm seeing in the game that people are kind of going like, oh, this is an amazing thing, they're not new. In many cases, they're 20 plus years old. I think the most new quote unquote thing that the game has is the free aim for shooting. And even that, I think, is something I've seen before somewhere else. If you gun to head, pun kind of intended, I wouldn't be able to tell you where I saw it, but it wouldn't shock me if it existed in some indie title or something else. At bare minimum, choosing weak points is not a new system in these type of games, and that's not to say that Clair Obscur or Expedition 33 didn't execute well on its ideas. I don't want to take that away from the game. There's been sort of a concept of like, oh, it's Dark Soulified, you know, turn-based RPGs, or it's just it's just so much more reactive and so forth. And well, no, these systems are old. Like they're PlayStation 1 old. Mario RPG had this on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. Like these are not new systems. QuickTime events in these games are not new systems. It's just that the packaging is much better.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of mentioned this, and the only thing I'll say here to the pushback there, as far as like these systems have existed, and there are games that have existed since Final Fantasy, 25 years ago. But the thing is, for gamers, for a generation of gamers that's maybe younger than us, that the only Final Fantasy they know is like, what was it, Final Fantasy 15, with Nox, and is action based. And the turn-based genre of, Golden Sun and, Final Fantasy Tactics and things of that nature, and the original, like, Final Fantasy type stuff, that's not a perspective. They didn't live through it. They didn't experience that firsthand necessarily, so that may not be the norm for them. So for a newer age of gamer coming in turn-based, yes, it's been out there, but not pushed into the mainstream, which I think is what Clair Obscur has kind of done. It's brought it out from where just maybe the fans of turn-based games and RPG games will prop things up, and it's accepted by the masses. Whereas I'm having a hard time, aside from Baldur's Gate 3, right? Because that was probably the last one that I think was very much a critical success and was accepted, but before Baldur's Gate 3 is not something that's easily replicated, considering all the development time and everything that went into creating that game. And there's plenty of articles and such out there about how much goes into it. So
yeah.
So 3 to me is kind of like an exception more so than like the rule in terms of how games are developed. So in terms of like a masterpiece, especially from Sandfall Studios here, this being their first game. So it's a studio that people didn't know of, weren't aware of, and so there's no history, and it just came out, and everybody agrees that it's done right. I think that's great for the genre moving forward, and I'm excited to see how other studios will respond, because there's a lot of things that this game does. And we can dive into some of the what I mean by that. I'll expand on that when we touch on things like characters and music and such in a little bit. But that's just kind of how I feel with the reaction to it, and I'm ultimately glad to see it be accepted by the masses.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm trying to gatekeep or saying that, this again, that the game is less than what it is. It is absolutely a success. It is absolutely a great game. I'm happy for it. I'm happy for the increased exposure that the genre is getting. I think my biggest frustration with it is primarily the kind of the idea that because they haven't released a turn-based RPG Final Fantasy, turn-based RPGs are dead. When we can look at Atlas, we can look at a number of different studios and other game series that have absolutely been doing well and been thriving, despite the fact that Square hasn't put out one. Like, I don't think the turn-based genre rests solely on Square's back. Square Enix's back. That it's a deeper and wider well of games than perhaps it's getting credit for. Is sort of my big grumbling old man complaint, but. I'll leave it there, and we'll go into mechanics.
And to your credit, to wrap it up real quick, I would agree with your sentiment of whoever's saying it's game of the decade. That I think is a little preemptive. That's a little early to call that one. As far as game of the year, to me right now this one is the leader for game of the year. We'll see. We still got half the year left. But as far as to say it's the game of the decade, yeah, I think that would be a little overblown. But yeah, let's get into some of the gameplay and mechanics. Steve, I know you wanted to talk about some things, so where do you want to start? And I will follow along.
Well, I was thinking we can probably start with combat. I think that that's sort of the easiest one to start with and break down. It's where you're going to probably be spending a majority of your time in the game, and most of your interesting gameplay decisions tend to rotate around gearing up and building up your team and your crew. Um, so I guess. Dave, you mentioned the parry system was one that you didn't mesh with you amazingly. So how did you kind of build your team, and what systems did you use to kind of get around that particular mechanic?
Yeah, so it's just a skill diff for me. I like I said, it's nothing against the system itself or the game. It's just I recognize I am not the best at that. It also didn't help, and I was glad to see other gamers, and clips from other people playing that they also struggled with some of this stuff too. It wasn't just me, because I'm trying to go off of maybe the visual cue from an enemy, and then they do like a fake swing, and then or a hesitation or a charge up, and
Yeah, they pull
or
the
they
Dark
let you
Souls.
they let you know it's well. As somebody who hasn't been immersed into the Dark Souls universe, again, this is all relatively new to me, right? The only Dark Souls I've physically played was the original one, and I think I played it through the first boss and thought, I think this can be good. Not for me. But things like that, or things about not letting you know to the last second it's a jump dodge as opposed to just like a regular parry. But some of the small gripes I have here are things like the timing in terms of like a gradient parry, like when in the animation are you supposed to do it, because that wasn't always the same. And then me being more musically inclined, listening for audio cues. While audio cues are a good measure, they were not always necessarily synced up with when the parry window was. So that was a little frustrating. But how we got around it, I think, it's just with practice, right? It's learning. Ultimately, it's just learning enemies' timings and mechanics and such. That's really what it was for me. But in terms of what party I used, I do kind of want to touch on that because I want to ask you about your builds and what characters you used, just from a gameplay perspective, not factoring in personalities and stuff like that quite yet. Um, but as far as my team, so there's the 5 playable characters, and you get your main party has 3, and then the reserve team will have 2. And what carried me through most of the game was I don't think this is going to be a shocker to anybody, but Mael, Monoko, and Lune carried me through a heavy dosage of Act 2, and then once I got to Act 3, and I 100%ed the game. I unlocked and everything like that. So when I was doing some of the quote unquote post game stuff that I was doing before I actually fought the final boss, my party switched up a little bit. I pulled Lune out, and I put in Verso, and still Mael, and then I would kind of Monoko ended up being my for lack of a better term, my Picto bitch. So whenever I needed to get the 4 battles to master a Picto, they were going on Monoko, and he was going in the battle. Plus, I was trying to get all of the Neveron feat for him, so that's what only logically made sense. So, but when I didn't need a Picto bitch, Monaco was out, and then Sael was back in, and then like my backup team would be Lune and Monaco. And I eventually got to the point where for Mael, I got to post game after that first patch where they kind of nerfed her, so she wasn't the one shot build wasn't as easy to construct. It required a little bit more effort, but I did still ultimately get her to the one shot build. And then it's just a question of, can I dodge or parry the attacks, right? That's what it ultimately came down to. For Lune, I was using her in Act 2, and I really enjoyed her combo of the Elemental Genesis to get the 4 uh, 4 different element things, and then using the heavy hitter that you can only use when you have one of each elements in your weapon. And I like that mechanic. I like the idea of elemental reactions and stuff like that, and so it required a little bit of strategy. Whereas for my L, it was essentially, I'm gonna buff you, and then you're gonna one shot things. Verso similarly could get strong enough to like do some heavy damage, but his build was very much a glass cannon. So like as soon as you get hit, right, he loses its perfection. And so as someone who was not good at dodges, I wanted to play Verso because I was forcing myself to get better. And that's really how I went about doing it. But that was my team comp for Act 2 and Act 3 in slash post game. What about you, Steve? What character's gameplay did you enjoy and ultimately utilize?
I primarily for Act 2 and most of Act 3, I was a Verso main, as it were. I used his duelist sword, and basically it was, build as much AP as you could, burn it all on pistol shots, and then just attack. So basic attack boosts, pistol shot boosts, or targeted shot, whatever. I forget what they call it. Those shot boosts, and basically just go to town with that. Simple, easy, flat damage. Wasn't anything impressive. I'm going to be honest, my builds were very meh until I got to basically the last boss, where I sat down and went, okay, fine. If I'm going to potentially do the end game, I might as well see what the options are. And I settled on Lune as a crit build. This way she could automatically get the 4 elements that she needed to use her big ultimate. Monoko
Stains. That's what they're called. Stains. Sorry. I think I remember. Sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. And then Monoko was support, to basically provide a shield to the party with one of his blue mage abilities. And then finally, I had Sael to basically give an additional turn to Lune. So I hyper carried Lune basically in the end game. Or I didn't do a lot of the end game. I basically beat it and then moved on to other games. I didn't have the patience to try and 100% it. Again, not that it was a bad game, but when we get to the story section, I think my consternation will bleed through a little bit more. But yeah, no, it was fun. The systems are extremely interesting. Pictos are cool. It's my understanding is that basically the developer stole the junction system from Final Fantasy VIII and said, "What if we did that, but better?" And so they went that route. You can kind of see where all of the characters' different inspirations come from. I think it's well known at this point, but the head developer has a YouTube channel, and the only thing that's on it are perfect no-hit runs of DMC or Devil May Cry, like Virgil runs and so forth. So the man has a type. He has a style of gameplay that he enjoys, and he found a way to merge it with something else in a rather interesting manner. But yeah, were there any other mechanics or anything else that you wanted to go over?
I like the Picto system, in terms of mastering the Pictos, and then in terms of using the Lumina points to ultimately, then make your character stronger and figuring out, what Pictos and synergize with what Pictos, so you know what to invest your Lumina points in. The weapon upgrade system was very straightforward and easy to understand, and I think the only thing that I thought could maybe have been improved on with the Pictos was when you initially get a Picto, it's whatever level it is, but then you can ultimately get another copy of it later on, and then it's like maybe it was a level 9 Picto, but then you beat a baddie and it drops a Picto, and then it's upgraded to level 25. I think I would have liked to maybe see a different way of leveling up Pictos, maybe giving them their own passive experience, whether it be similar to what it takes to master them, just doing like a certain number of battles, or whether it be finding or whether it be like an experience number, like how the characters themselves level up. I think something along that line is better than randomly having it drop from a certain monster group that you have to go find, or a gestural merchant that is maybe in a zone that you haven't visited or don't even know exists, to upgrade it. And again, it's just a minor, small gripe, because I understand that that suggestion would come with its own problems, in terms of, well, then you just power level all the Pictos and have super high Picto levels before you've really advanced in the game. And there's other things you can do, like put soft caps on things to where like you can't progress past a certain level until you reach a certain point in the story. So there are, like I said, there are issues with the system I was kind of hoping for with that. I do have some some resolutions to those, but I understand, you know, they made the decision they did for reasons. I'm sure they talked it back and forth a lot. But yeah, as far as the gameplay mechanics in that regards, the battling mechanics is really well done, and it never really got old. I know sometimes in turn-based RPGs, combat gets really stale or it gets really boring, because it's very repetitive, right? How many times have we joked about that in other RPGs about the level grind, and like how tedious it is to grind out. But for me, I never got bored with the combat, because I was always, to me, I wanted to try out a different build or different team synergy, or I was, learning a boss's attack animations so I could learn to dodge and parry better. But what about you, Steve? I wanted to touch on the combat real quick, and then we can jump to something else. But as far as the combat, did you ever get bored with the combat?
Um, Full disclosure, yeah, there was a couple fights that I got bored with, primarily because I felt there were certain challenges that if you weren't equipped and built in a very specific manner, the fights were rather painful. Part of that is, I'll be fully honest, I looking at the way other people played the game, I feel like I brute forced it primarily with, I don't want to say skill. I'm definitely not going to use the word skill here. But I definitely chose to just rely on blocks and parries and dodges and so forth, to get me through um, fights, more so than my ability to build and manipulate the system to do lots of damage. I was very grindy. So there were a number of the fights that probably I could have ended a lot sooner and a lot more smoothly, if I had gone with better builds. But I, at the time, was just trying to get through the story and trying to get through the game. I didn't want to spend a lot of time hunting and pecking and trying to optimize. So I kind of just went with whatever worked, and was able to get me through it. So yeah, I don't think it, again, I don't want to say it's a bad system. It's just that there were points where I was kind of going, you know what, this isn't gelling for me, especially when you mentioned with the Pictos and so forth. There were a number of times where, I'm going to be honest, like you had to Google in order to find what you were looking for in order to really build out a character, because you would never know if what you're about to fight has something that's actually worthwhile, or if it was just a slight buff to a Picto you already owned, or it was, one of the more broken Pictos. Usually if the fight was difficult, you'd get something valuable from it, but there were a couple that I was kind of going like, okay, I got a weapon upgrade, woohoo. But anyways, I think
Let's
I'll
jump
leave
into
it there.
let's jump into the story a little bit, because the story and the characters and the writing and stuff, I do kind of want to jump into that, because that's another reason I think that the game has been so well received and has been so successful. Starting with the story, I think it's very well done. I was intrigued by the premise, the transition from Act 2 to Act 3, when you learn that, they're in a painting, and this is just kind of like the Matrix, essentially. I didn't love that was the excuse to like for all this. I was a little disappointed that was the outcome. But I said, you know what? But they've done a good job up to this point. Let's let it get to its conclusion. Let's see where they go, and see if they can, do this out, pretty well. And And they did. Honestly, they did. I was gripped by the story from the very beginning, and I knew it was going to be something special story wise. And you may not have felt this, but playing the prologue and that cutscene when you finish the prologue when the gamage happens. The fact that we had been playing at that point, maybe 15, 30 minutes, depending on how fast or how thorough you're being, right? Teach their own. Right, but in that very short time period, you were so attached to these characters and their plight and the horror of the unknown of what was going on or why it was going on, and it just captured you. That cut scene when Gustav is watching everybody around him gomage, including like kind of his love, the one that got away. I said, "Oh man, they have got me emotionally invested in his plight, and I've only known him for 30 minutes. Like this, we're in for a treat. Like we're going to be in for a ride." And then you start Act 1 on that opening beach scene, and it's essentially D-Day, but instead of a bunch of German, one badass.
Yeah.
In Renoir, but we don't know it's Renoir, right? But it's one badass, just utter
Also
sheer terror
instead of the English and Americans, but that's also
yeah. Come on, we all get the parallels.
I know,
but anyway, so all that was very well done, and then we can get into the intricacies of like in the story itself, but then also the ending, because there are multiple endings that you can choose, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong ending. I feel, and we can maybe dive more on this.
So, yeah, let's do that.
But we'll do that in a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess before I get into the ending, back to you on your story, the introduction. Did you feel as strongly as I did on the prologue, or how did you feel with the story?
So I've got a rant for this section. I'm going to be
okay.
I've got a rant, which is why I'm going to say I agree that the prologue is very strong. I think a lot of it is carried by the music, which is a subject that we were going to hold off a little bit on. But I do think the music is very good. The setup is very strong. I am going to force through let's compare the endings thing, because again, I have a rant, and I want to get it's going to be a mostly negative one. So let's get good stuff. I'll be bad guy, and then I'll say all these.
I'll try and balance it. I'll try and balance it out. I'll balance it out.
Yeah. So out of question, which ending did you choose?
Well, I ultimately went and did both, but as far as which one,
which one is your
as far as which one, like morally, I would want to be the true ending, and what I would do, it would be making Alicia face reality.
Okay, so we are of the same brain cell there. That I chose Verso's ending as well.
Yeah, that is ultimately Verso's ending. Yes, even though yes.
Yes, I know, but when you have to choose, you have to side with either Verso or with Alicia.
Yeah, it's just that is his ending, but ultimately he disappears in that one, right? Then but it's his ending, quite literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Okay. So now my rant. I was really.
All right, floor is yours. I'm gonna sit back and listen.
So I've got a couple of points I want to go over. So I'm going to start with my first one, which is I think the story is overly focused on big, bombastic, emotional moments. That the end of the prologue, the end of Act 1, Act 2, and even Act 3 are hyper focused on getting you to a twist. The big twist at the end of the prologue is the grammage. The sort of kind death that everybody gets there. Then in Act 1, Gustav's fate, at the end of that, and the twist, quote unquote, that happens there. And then, of course, with Act 2, the basically what you find out about the paintress and the fact that it's a painted world and so on and so forth, and that it's not real. That basically this is a fight over Minecraft server is basically the summation that I have heard it put down with. And then, there is no good ending of Act 3. You either get Verso's ending, where basically you destroy the painted world, force everybody out of the painting, and the family drama that takes over Act 3 is sort of resolved, or, Alicia stays in the painting and the painted world gets a happy ending, but, the family out in the quote-unquote real world is functionally shattered. And there's really no good ending in that sense. And that I feel like the writing really hinges on, do those big twists land? And if one of them misses, a lot of the work and goodwill in the story can go away. It's not my cup of tea. I think part of what my frustration is that I liked the story of the prologue, Act 1 and Act 2. Then Act 3 comes in and basically says all that shit in those first 3 acts doesn't matter, now a family drama. Where what used to be a background story, not a bad story, but a sub theme, a plot of the game, all of a sudden takes over, and it's what matters now. It's what's most important. It takes over and sort of metastasizes throughout it, and the previous plot, the previous work that's been put in, is kind of tossed aside. In a way that I'm not a fan of. I know that there's a lot of people out there who have had discussions like, oh, is the painted world real? Are the people real? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm not really necessarily 100% interested in that discussion, since I feel like the writers themselves kind of didn't care. Like, it wasn't, they spent a lot of work building up the world building of Lumiere and the setting and so forth. And then they kind of just went, it turns out it's manufactured, and removed a lot of the magic from it for me. So I think my big frustration is that if you buy in really heavily, or you really enjoyed acts, the prologue, Act 1 and Act 2, Act 3 undercuts a lot of that. If you really enjoy Act 3, you're spending a lot of time building up to something that, if you like Act 3, that's great, but you now have to chew through 3 acts functionally of plot that you might not be as interested in, of a lot of lead up and foreshadowing that goes someplace interesting for you, but why would you care to get there, in that sense? Again, I know I'm being negative. It's just this storytelling style really didn't work for me. If I was the editor of this game, of this story, I'd kind of be going, why? No, this, it's not that they're doing bad in foreshadowing or anything. It's just, it's such a large twist and such a strong turn, especially right near the end of the game, that it clicks poorly with me.
First, let me say that while I think, like I mentioned, the transition from Act 2 to Act 3, and learning that we're in a painted world, and then we shift towards the family fallout and the family drama, I didn't love that. It's like when a show or a movie introduces time travel into the plot, and it's like, we can just explain anything through time travel nonsense, and therefore it doesn't have to make like logical real sense. We can just say, time travel. Like, it was kind of the same thing. I was like, none of this has to really be described, because it's a painted world, so that is what it is. And it feels lazy to me. But again, to kind of what you had said, if we didn't take to one of the endings of the acts, it can throw away kind of all that goodwill and stuff. It didn't reach that threshold to make me want to throw out. They garnered up enough goodwill for me to say, okay, let's see this through, let's see how it plays out, and then actually ended up liking the conclusion. Like, I felt like I walked away from the computer feeling a certain sort of way, just because I was just emotionally like in it, and just thinking about the endings and the differences in the ending. But let me throw it to you this way, because you talk about like not really true, like a real happy ending. But if we really think about it, at the end of every single marker in the game, whether it be the end of the prologue, the first act, second act, third act, none of them end on a good note. So it's almost as if they're kind of foreshadowing, this isn't going to have a happy, feel-good conclusion.
Just to clarify, I have no problem with the ending of the game. Like, I don't think the fact that it ended on a sad note is a detriment to the game.
Okay, I thought you said you didn't like the ending. I'm sorry.
No, well, I don't like Act 3. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't like Act 3. I think Act 3 took a lot of what I enjoyed about the game, and its story and its world building and so on and so forth, and basically flushed it for a family drama that is interesting to discuss. Like, we can spend a lot of time talking about how bad a family the Desirees, I think, I forget what the actual name of the family is now. It's been a week or two since I actually played the game.
Descendere or something like that. Yeah,
Descendres or whatever. That as a family, they're basically a massive cluster. Like, there's lots to discuss. There's room to talk about them and the cluster that they are, but that's not what I played the game for. That's not what I picked it up for. That's not what I fell in love with. And if people enjoy that, that's fine. but I do feel that there was a bait and switch that happened where we got to the end of Act 2, and instead of it turning out that the Paintress takes her second form and has in fact become the King of Hell, or become the One-Winged Angel, or become Sin, the final Aeon, whatever their big transformation is and whatever that big final act is, it instead was kind of let's take what was one story and try and stretch it out and focus on this other, what could have been interesting subplot or background thing, and bring it to the forefront and really hyper focus on that didn't ring well with me. I don't have a problem with the endings. I actually fine with Verso's ending. I think that was a great.
That's my misunderstanding. I thought you said you didn't love that it didn't necessarily have a happy or feel good ending, and I think that they left breadcrumbs to let us know like this wasn't going to be a happy go lucky ending. It was meant to make you think, and like I said, and the endings were both done in a way that there's not necessarily a good ending or a bad ending. It's just where you align with some of the moral justifications of things. And so for me, I more aligned with you're facing reality, however rough it may be.
Yeah, we're both Marsh from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance.
So but
yes, I will make that pull.
That was it. Yeah, that's a throwback. Excited to see what they do with the newly announced Final Fantasy Tactics. Anyway, that's months down the road. But as far as this one, the other thing too is not just like the main story arc, right? The other reason that maybe I felt a little bit betrayed, as it were, and I think you did as well there, with this world that was built up and then it turns into a family drama in a completely different world, right? Mm-hmm. I think part of the reason that hurt so much is because a lot of these characters were so well written, and then they don't really exist, right? So, because like a character like Sael's backstory is so sad, and how she deals with the grief and everything, and walks out into the ocean, and then it's actually SKA, sorry, Q, not P. SKA, who like saves her, and that's why he recognized her when we first meet them very early on in the game. Mm-hmm. Lune's character is so well done. Like, she is focused on the aspect, like her whole life is dedicated to this research. And there were moments. I remember there was a moment in the game where Mael was being overcome with emotion. I think it was maybe with the caretaker. And when time was frozen and she saw Alicia maybe for the first time, and they're all calming her down and giving her a minute, and Lune's like, no, you need to tell me now exactly what much detail as possible. And everybody's talking Lune down like, no, she needs to take a moment. Like, no, Lune is right in this. She's being completely logical, and I loved Lune as a character. And I think that this is something else that speaks to the positive of the game, especially in the grander scheme of things, where we have this, because to me this is very much thrown against the backdrop of games like Avowed and Dragon Age Veilguard, and in those games the characters, the writing, not the best. I won't even go into full depths of how much of a problem I have with things in Dragon Age Veilguard as far as the writing goes, but these characters are so well done. They're complex, and they have a personal journey that they develop and they grow on, and you partake in through those campsite fires. And this is maybe my little bit of a diatribe, but I think it's for a positive, and it's maybe a rant against Western characters and Western writing that we've come to kind of experience in the past little bit. But like characters like Lune and Sael, they're strong, they're very formidable, they're independent, they're all these things, and they're also like very, elegantly animated. Like Lune's attack animation, and like kind of like the way like she holds up her hand with her weapon type thing, and like it's all very, very well done, and such a huge breath of fresh air to character and Verso and Mom, they're back and forth with each other. I think one of the funnier moments, I know I referenced the woo-wee with SKA earlier, but one of the funnier moments that actually had me, I let out an audible laugh, was when we're first kind of meeting Monaco with Verso. We're trying to recruit him to come to us, and Monaco's like, I'm never going to adventure with you again. And Verso just goes, well, there will be a lot of fighting. And Monaco's like, all right, I'm in. It's just the way the voice actors lines, which is very well done and comical, like two old buddies, which, essentially they were in the game. I think revealed later on just how so. And so I think when you add in the story, you add in a refreshing twist on a turn-based game that incorporates the popularity of the Elden Ring and action RPG aspects, and then you just have the cherry on top be beautiful characters that are very well written, are complex and very deep in terms of the evolution that they go through as the story progresses, and even Mael as well, like for evolution as she learns more things, because she's just getting emotionally haymaker after haymaker, taking a beating. And
I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I agree with everything. Mael just didn't land for me.
and then that's fine.
Yeah.
She landed for me. I know some people she doesn't land for, especially because people are like, this is Shadowheart's voice actor from Baldur's Gate 3, and there's plenty of memes with Shadowheart. But anyway, to wrap up my point real quick, I think all of these things, and then we touched on the music very brief, but like this is music I will listen to when I'm not playing the game. Like it's very good. And the whole package, when you put all these pieces that are very good together, it makes it what it is, and that's why it has the success that it does, and I'm glad that it does. To show us that it is possible to be done in an RPG, in a turn-based strategy, without over a decade of development like Baldur's Gate 3 was, which is a gem as well. Please don't get me wrong, love Baldur's Gate 3. But again, that had a unique development cycle. And so to see this one done how it was and be as successful was shows, hopefully shows the smart big studios that it can be done and RPGs are wanted. So I'll get off of my little soapbox there and kind of throw back for your response, and then I want to get into kind of my critiques of the game.
Fair enough. All I'm hearing from you, Dave, is that you've become a Weiaboo. But anyways, I don't necessarily disagree. So as far as character work goes, I think the character work is very strong. Most of my criticism is from a plotting and story perspective, not a character one. Again, the characters are all great. Minoko carries the team. Verso has some great interactions with a number of the other characters. I don't like Mael slash Alicia, but I think that's mainly because I find her character very hateable. Not that character hasn't suffered and has reasons for why she is the way she is. I just get she was very frustrating. She had a personality that did not.
Do you think it's because she's 16 and you just don't have time for angsty teenagers?
I'm gonna be honest. It's more the fact that she's irresponsible and she lies. That like I'm gonna be honest. The entire Desandre family drives me nuts. Like they take the worst route to get what they want done. Like I feel like this is a lot of their problems could have been resolved by taking a minute, stepping back and going, wait a second, I don't need to spend 67 years burning my son's, Minecraft server to the ground in order to get my wife to leave it. That maybe there's a more efficient way of doing this that could get me what I wanted without potentially ruining my marriage. But, that's one thing. Hey, maybe when you finally reconciled with your father, you don't lie to the man and refuse to meet him halfway when he met you halfway. And, maybe you should have gotten your ass out of that painting and talked with him like a grown-ass adult. The only character from that family I like is the oldest daughter, is Claire? I cannot remember
Claire?
that. Claire.
Clea or Claire?
I think it's Claire. Claire. She's the only one that I respect. All of the other ones, they deserve everything that they get.
That's really funny to me because a vast majority of the opinions I've read are the exact opposite.
That's because
she's like she's the least popular family member, and everybody likes everybody else, and so it's just funny to me that you're the inverse of that.
She's the only one with a head on her shoulders. She's focused on her goal, and she doesn't get caught up in everyone else's bullshit. I am sorry. She is amazing. Tin, best family member. If she had been everybody in this family, shit would have gotten done. But anyway, moving on.
All right, so I know I've been very positive with the game, and ultimately I am, but I did have a few gripes with it. I mentioned some of them earlier there with in terms of the Pictos and how they level up. Along those same lines of Pictos, inventory management. I think you maybe touched on this very briefly, but inventory management when you're sorting through all the Pictos and spending your Lumina points. Um, I wish it could have been done a little more user friendly ish. Um, but
I'm going to be honest. I had to use the best thing that I found was when you're in the Picto option. I think it's like right trigger and left trigger will let you move between like offense, defense, and support. And that helped a little by just reducing the list to something a little bit more manageable. But that was the best I could get.
yeah, and I understand there's sorting and there's filters and stuff that I could maybe better utilize, sure. Um, but like when I'm maybe putting on a Picto just to like master it real quick, and then I want to switch back or something of that nature, or I'm looking for specific substats on the Pictos. I don't know if you can sort by that or not. I didn't remember that being one,
I
but
didn't remember that
again,
either, but
I wasn't looking too deep. But anyway, so that was one thing. Another thing, and I understand the decision being made for immersion purposes, but my God, I would have loved a mini map. There were numerous zones where I get turned around or lost. And I'm a person that when I'm doing exploring, I want to explore 100% of a map, and I want to know that I 100% of the map. This is my downfall in a lot of but I can't really do that here to a guaranteed extent because there is no mini map. So I can, take all the bends and breaks and the turns and stuff, but I won't actually know if I went to every single spot. Every spot. Slowly becoming a man. And so I would have liked to see a mini map. The open map is nice, but also could have used some optimization, I feel, as well, in terms of its responsiveness and navigating it. And then along those same lines of the overworld map, I would love a fast travel option. I can't tell you the number of times when I was trying to work on a post game build and I needed, and I'm like, okay, where's this picked up? It's on the other side of the map. Fantastic. Let me go get it. All right. Do I have this picked up? Nope, I don't have this picked up. All right, where's this one? Oh my God, it's all the way back where I came from, type that, which, yeah, part of that is I could have organized it better in terms of my efficiency and routes. But if you just give me a fast travel option to places I've already been, it would have saved me a lot of time. Now, that being said, just a quick praise in this regards is the other thing this RPG did that I think is nice, is gameplay, time investment into beating the game. We talked about Road Trader in the last episode of our off banner, and I was talking about 86, 90 hours for a full clear on that. And this game you could do in like 30, 40 hours. But if you wanted to, maybe 100%, or you could get more value out of it if you wanted to. But for the story narrative portion, it didn't require that huge of a time investment, which I understand. An 80, 90 hour time sink is a huge investment into a game that not everybody's willing to make. And I think that could also potentially be another reason things aren't as popular as maybe they could be. Though, I mean, The Witcher 3 was incredibly popular, and that was
yeah,
huge.
I think there's
What was your
there's
game?
definitely a
What was
balance.
your gameplay hours like? Because I 100% of the game, and I know I was sitting at like 50-ish hours, but you didn't 100% the game. And so, how long did it take you to beat it?
31 hours, and I functionally skipped most of Act 3. The only thing I did was minimal grinding in order to basically get my Lune build online, and then I spent like 20 to 30 minutes fighting whatever the boss is that gets you the 2-turn Picto, the one that lets you take
Oh,
2
the
actions.
cheater
Cheater,
Picto, yes.
yeah. I basically cheesed that boss through parries and so forth. And that took me about, I think, 30 minutes to do. So 31 and a half is, I think, my play time. So if you remove that, 31 hours.
And then my last gripe will be involving the Gestural Beaches and the mini games. Not all of them. Not all of them.
I think I can guess which
some
one.
of the there's what, 5 of them now. To 100% the game. Thank God I didn't have to do the hardest volleyball game. but that was by far my least favorite mini game to try and complete. It was, to me, it felt inconsistent as far as when you were supposed to hit the things back and deflect them. And it also felt very specific in terms of how you had to be positioned. So that mini game was by far the most painful one for me to do. My next least favorite one was probably the wall climb, because that was one where you had the 3 columns, and you had to dodge the balls as you climbed up higher and higher and higher to get to the top. And that one was obnoxious because the controls weren't responsive as quick as I wanted them to be. Like if I needed to dodge something and dodge something quick, I wasn't able to do it because it was still like I guess finishing up the animation technically, even though there wasn't animation going on like that. I had jumped from another column. I enjoyed the only up mini game. I at first I didn't, but that's because I literally had gone to the top, and right when you're running to the last bit, they put you on a straightaway. And if you just go up and you go straight, like no big deal, and you don't adjust anything, they put a little hole in the ground. They just put this little hole, like they just carves out, right? So it's like you're walking on a plank, right? And then just 30% of the plank is missing in one particular spot, and it's just big enough for you to fall through. And so I fell down, and so I was ticked about that. But then, I completed it relatively shortly after that, and I chuckled because I was like, developers knew what they were doing with that hole. Because all the gestrels are around you cheering, celebrating because you've made it at the top.
Yeah.
You need to go to the actual gestrel to get your reward. And in that hole, if you're not paying attention, boom, and then you just fall. And it's like, they knew what they were doing. The parkour one was nice and easy. The race one that you had to do 38 seconds to get the reward, that was fine, well and good. Once I actually knew it to go, that was a piece of cake. That was fine. So but the volleyball one, that was the biggest annoyance in the entire game. Yeah, just awful. But like I said, 100%ed it. Beat Simon, beat Clair. Those were some tough fights. My L one-shot build is pretty viable. I was just, again, me being not great at dodging. Took a few attempts, but and then the other thing too, I want to share just for those that like cosmetics and stuff, because if you beat Clair, you can choose an outfit for any of the girls. But the catch is you can only pick one. Like the NPC says he can make the outfit, but only for one character. There is a glitch that was still working as of the other week when I did this, where you can get all 3 costumes in one playthrough. So you don't have to do the playthrough essentially 3 times. But you go talk to the boy, the child, right, in the main region or the main area. He gives you the costume, and then you don't leave the area, but you go back to where one of the 4 mini bosses was that you have to beat to unlock Clair. You go to where one of them was, and you talk to the little boy that's there to teleport you back to the main room. And if you do that multiple times, like if you go teleport back, you talk to the boy in the main room, his dialogue will reset and he'll make the next costume. You just choose the next character. Hopefully I've explained that to where it makes sense. But yeah, basically travel to any of the mini boss locations, talk to the boy there to teleport you to the main room, talk to the main room boy, and his dialogue will reset. And so you just do that twice. Now you can get all 3 costumes in one playthrough. And the other tip I will share that I was unaware of till after the fact was Mael's best weapon for essentially Act 2 and the rest of the game. During the main story quest, when you're in the Gestrel village, and you're doing the tournament leading up to meeting Sael, you can choose who to fight in a fight for the last fight. Choose Mael. That way, if you win, you get her best weapon, because alternatively, the only other way to get it is to then beat Gorga, who is like the Gestrel camp leader, beat her in a one-on-one fight. And at that point in the game, she is one-shotting you. And again, as somebody who's awful at dodges, I had to grind healthy, decent way before I was actually able to go do that fight. So just a little tip there, especially if you're going to my L, is to do that to get your best weapon. So those are my quick tips there. If you've stuck around this long, hit you with some quick tips there. I think that's all I got. We touched on the music. Like I said, music's fantastic. I listen to it outside of gaming. There's my only gripe with that is when I ask my Amazon Echo to play the songs, it doesn't understand what I'm asking it to do. So I had to be very specific in what I'm asking for. And the fact that like the album as it's organized on Amazon Prime is 134 songs long.
Ooh, okay.
It's hard to get the specific one that I'm looking for because there's maybe an instrumental version only, or there's, the boss version of that music, et cetera, et cetera. But that's an Amazon Prime issue. That's not a Clair Obscur issue. The music is fantastic.
Agreed.
But did you have any other closing thoughts, Steve, or any other things we didn't touch on that you want to bring up?
No. Again, I just want to say that I know I probably came off as rather negative. I did enjoy the game. I do like it. It's mainly, I feel like there's a certain amount of hyperbole that's worked its way into the discussion around it that annoys me. But it is an amazing game. Probably my game of the year, if I'm being 100% honest. Just have some quibbles with it. That's all.
All right. Well, we do want to thank you guys for joining us this week. Go ahead and let us know your thoughts on Expedition 33.
All right. And just as a heads up, unfortunately, due to some personal life events, we will probably have to take a hiatus, an undetermined length for a while. We do hope to come back, but if we don't, I do want to thank everyone for listening to us for as long as you guys have. I wish you the best.
Yeah, so you can still join us over in the Discord. We'll still be active over there, regardless of if we're posting new content or not in the future. So that link to the Discord will be down below. Still follow and subscribe to the channel if you like as well, for that instance maybe if we do come back. So whether we come back or if we don't, until then, and regardless, keep gaming.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.